Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of SEPA Paranormal Chronicles. Tonight, I am delighted to have somebody quite local to where I am, Jim Dean. Jim is the creative director for the Haunted Walks in Ottawa. So I'm in Ottawa as well, so it's nice and local. Jim, welcome.
Lee, thanks so much for having me. I've been watching episodes here and there, so I was delighted when you asked me to be on the show, and I'm excited to have some spooky conversation. That's for sure.
Well, and it's weird how you guys do kind of the Haunted Walks, and we both do podcasts, but we've never kind of like got together, which is like, what? Why is this, Jim? Tell me, Jim, why have we never got together?
Well, I think the spirits have deemed it that this was the time. It was destiny has called us forward to this moment. So here we are. Let's make the most of it.
Oh, 100%. So what I always like to do with people is I always like to start at the very beginning. So how did you get involved with ghost spirits and the paranormal?
Good question. And maybe I'll take you back a little bit even before, well, not before me, but before I get involved as we slow dissolve into that. My boss, the founder of the Haunted Walk, Glenn Shackleton, starts the company in Kingston in 1995. And it quickly becomes something unique, something different, something quite popular. People just hadn't really seen ghost tours in Canada at that time. And I think there was only three, including us in Kingston, Dale Jarvis in St. John's with the Haunted Hike, and I think Halifax as well. We're kind of the only three at that time. So for the Canadian audience, this was quite different, quite revolutionary. And that first year was kind of funny. One of Glenn's favorite stories to tell, which I enjoy telling too, is the first year we're in Kingston doing the tours, and all of a sudden this police car with its sirens, going, pulls right up on the sidewalk in front of Glenn and his tour group, and the cops get out. And apparently someone had reported that cult activity was taking place as we were visiting Skeleton Park, an old former cemetery in Kingston. So Glenn gives them, the rundown of what's happening. I think he gave them a brochure as well. And they end up coming on the tour that summer with their families. So the popularity really starts to pick up quite quickly. Glenn ends up starting the Haunted Walk of Ottawa in 1996. And same kind of trajectory, over time, everything feels very fast. I'm sure it didn't at the time, but, it became more popular, taking us to 2003 when I was at Carleton doing my master's degree in film studies. And I needed a part-time summer job. And kind of the Haunted Walk checked off two boxes for me. One, I had a little bit of experience with public speaking, so I felt comfortable talking to people and kind of shaping a spoken word presentation. But also, I've always been deeply fascinated in the mysteries of life. And the touchstone for me is kind of in elementary school. I don't know if you remember those Time Life books they had, but they had one that was like on, cryptids kind of things, one on UFOs, and of course one on ghosts or the paranormal, whatever it was called. So whenever our class got to go to the library, that's kind of immediately where I went to look at, some of the most famous ghost photos of all time and that kind of thing. So I had this kind of interest. And I listened to a lot of Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM, when I was in high school and even university. It became a little bit of a nightly ritual for me. And I partly I think that's one of the reasons I love being a podcaster and listening to podcasts today. There's something about your imagination and the role that plays in storytelling. Anyway, I auditioned for the Haunted Walk. I get a job and I start as a tour guide. And at that point in my career, I was working on a documentary film about baseball in Canada that I had grand dreams of kind of putting together. When after the first season, Glenn asked me if I kind of wanted to come on full time, and I was enjoying it. I'd never really worked inside at that point a small business before. Even things like tracking how many tickets we sold or where our guests were coming from. I found all this stuff kind of interesting. So I stayed on at the Haunted Walk, and 23 or so years later, I am still here and have not had to get a real job as of yet.
But the thing is, it's one of those cool jobs that everyone kind of wishes. I wish I could do that kind of thing, and you know, and no two work days are the same. I work in an office. My job can be the same day in day out, where you don't know who you're going to be meeting, what you're going to be talking about from day to day, and that's what makes it really cool.
You're absolutely right. And there's two ends of the spectrum responses I typically get. When people ask the obvious question at, parties and functions, what do you do? And, I tell them I work for the Haunted Walk. I'm the creative director. And one group of people will immediately ask, "Oh, is that a part-time job you do?" And which of course it is not. It literally takes everything we have to keep, the company running and doing things well. And then the other group of people are the ones who you just mentioned, who are like, "Wow, you do that full time as your job? That's got to be incredible." And to be honest, it is. I mean, it's hard to imagine moving into a more traditional job at this space, partly because it's, as you say, so varied, so interesting, the topics we get to explore. But also we have a really great team, and a lot of us have been working. There's several of us now worked for the company over 10 years, so we all know each other very well, and we work very collaboratively. No matter what anyone's kind of specialty is, we're always kind of consulting with each other as well, which I think has been part of our the secrets of our success. Glenn, our founder, was never one to say it's my way or the highway, which I think makes a humongous difference, because good ideas come from everywhere. So yeah, now I spend my days. I might be today. We were having long discussions about a slight change we want to make to our original Haunted Walk script here in Ottawa, and that's because we want to change the route slightly. And changing the route would mean cutting out our walk down the Rideau Canal, which has been on the tour for quite some time. So we've been trying to figure out over the past few months how we could still include the Rideau Canal, which not only just has an interesting history, is this kind of preventative defensive fortification in case the Americans, ever attacked us again, and we'd still have access to the St. Lawrence. But it also, of course, has a dark history as well. The number of laborers who died building that and ended up being buried along the banks of it. So, we spent maybe an hour today discussing the nuances of how we can pivot from one story to, is there a way we can include the canal kind of in another story and still get it to work. Well, at the same time today, as we were chatting just before we got on about, I was also doing marketing today, trying to figure out how do you sell ghost tours to the average person, particularly those who've never done one or never tried one. Because for me, I mean, belief is not an issue for going on a traditional ghost tour. It doesn't matter if you've had a paranormal experience or you don't believe in ghosts. The stories we tell are just, I mean, it's so interesting for us to work on them and then have such an opportunity to share them with people of how history unfolds in very, very interesting and unpredictable ways. And then tying in, of course, to one of the great questions of life, which is what happens to us when we die. So you're absolutely right. I have the work can be hard at times and the hours can be long, but I have no complaints.
And you couldn't ask for it to be any better, really. I was actually quite lucky to go to the jail when the jail was still open. I've lived in Canada for 13 years, and obviously when you first come to a new place, you kind of do a few of the local things. And in fact, I still am. I'm very good friends with the Doctor Who Society,
Yep.
and they invited us to go on a ghost walk. And the guy that was doing it, this is a few years ago, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but we ended up at the jail, and we was actually walking through the jail, and he's actually going, well, some of these cells are locked because we store things in them, etc., but some of them are open. And we walked past a locked one, and then we just heard this noise coming from the locked one, and nobody could understand what the noise was. It sounded like something had fallen, but there was nothing on the floor. And it was so cool to actually experience something, and as we put it, unexplained, rather than that's a ghost, that's a spirit. To actually experience that on one of these walks, that was great, and it was absolutely fantastic. It's a shame that you've actually, for reasons that we won't go into, that you've actually had to stop going to the jail.
Yeah, well, we do miss the jail. Hopefully someday we can get back there. But what you're talking about is, what I would call like the magic of a great ghost tour, the magic of storytelling, where kind of the audience, the teller, and the environment, the atmosphere, the location, all kind of combine together, and then you get that little sprinkle of something, as you say. Perhaps it was just a radiator. Perhaps there was a completely mundane explanation for it, but the right mundane thing happening at the right time is gold and just awesome for everyone involved on the tour.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as paranormal investigators, I tell a lot of people that you've always got the two types of people. You've got them that want to go out and get scared, and then you've got the other side that want to investigate and want to try to understand and actually explain what's going on. So we never say as a team that that's a ghost, this is a spirit. We just go, it's unexplained, and this unexplained pile is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because you can't explain something that you haven't got 100% proof of.
Absolutely. And I think you've drawn a kind of a key distinction. So, the Haunted Walk, we say we offer ghost tours and paranormal adventures, which of course share, and under paranormal adventures, we count our own Alone in the Dark paranormal investigations, which we run, as well as the events we partner with Phantoms of Yore, who are an awesome group we've worked with for many years now. Elliot and Eric are so much fun to work with and really know
Yep.
what they're doing. So, we kind of count those as the paranormal adventures, which are, as you say, while they share many similarities and are kind of about the same thing, the intent is so different, and the bar is so different. A great ghost story or a great dark history story doesn't need proof. It needs resonance. That moment. You know, Spoiler alert here for some listeners, but one of my favorite parts to reveal is when we tell our ghost stories about the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa, and we have some great ghost stories about the building. But we wrap it up by talking about the man who built the hotel, uh, Charles Hayes, who was expected to lead the opening as it was about to take place, but he did not make it back to do that because he had traveled to England and then taken a friend's offer to travel at a reduced rate on the maiden voyage of a new steamship, the Titanic. So creating that connection between the ghost stories and the Chateau Laurier, the physical structure itself is really right at the heart of Ottawa, and this broader historical context with the Chateau Laurier is something the ghost stories can do it and work with, whereas the paranormal investigations, really, as you say, are a different, almost more intellectual exercise than the emotional one of the storytelling.
Yeah. And this is a really fun fact that I love telling people, and you're going to find this amazing. We wouldn't have been created, SEPA would not have been created if it wasn't for the haunted walks. Because back in 2003, I went to one of the first Alone in the Dark adventures at Cumberland Heritage, and Logan and Volta, that are now my co-leads, they were there as well. They'd got a couple of advice, and it was Margot McDonald
Yes.
that was running it. And because I'd kind of taken over a small team, but they weren't very active, so I bumped into these two guys, started talking to them. I also spoke to Margot at the end of the night, and then we met together in one of the bars a couple of weeks later and created SEPA. So it's all down to the haunted walks and the Alone in the Dark Cumberland Village.
That's amazing. I had no idea that was the case. And it's been fun watching as you're building out your team, and you folks are doing all sorts of amazing things.
Yeah,
So wow, that makes me actually quite proud. And Margot McDonald is one
she
of our
is.
great hosts.
Yeah,
So shout out to Margot. But it is strange, like we've been doing it so long now. We routinely have tour guides applying, who did the tour when they were in grade 8, or something like that. So it's really it's very rewarding and just really special to think about this how we've made an impact on people in a lot of unexpected ways. We even have like wedding proposals on tour, which is which is always fun, or people asking us to work with them on things like that. So I mean, we're all about making the cities we operate in kind of more interesting and treasured places, both for locals and visitors alike. So hearing that that unexpected connection to you folks, I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's kind of blown my mind.
And just for the record, there won't be a marriage proposal because all three of us are already married. Just,
Okay, well,
just putting that out there. But it's really weird because another connection is there was only three of us to start off with. Our first investigation as a threesome was at the SDG jail with the Phantoms of Yore.
there you go.
Yeah, so it wasn't yet. So there's been so much kind of behind the scenes connections, if you like, without you actually going, oh, I didn't realize that and I didn't realize this. But yeah, Eric and Elliot are absolutely amazing guys and they do a fantastic job. There's one story that I've got from L'Oreal. I can never say that right. L'Oreal jail in Hawkesbury. See, I'm from England. I don't say French words very easily.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, that's it. And Elliot wanted a hand to set up one night because he's got a public investigation and he didn't like going into death row by himself. So he asked me if I could come. I went, yeah, sure. So I took the wife down with me and I'm in one of the rooms and got a stroke down the side of my face.
Oh,
Yeah. And it's like, I just got a stroke. He went, oh, yeah, that happens. And I went, no, this is a big thing. And it's like, yeah, it happens. And it's like, we've been to the Mill of Kintail with Elliot. We've been to a few other locations, but they're an absolutely fantastic resource to have and to get your name and their name out there. And if we get people that want to come to investigations, we forward them to Elliot and to Eric.
perfect.
Because they're the guys that do the public stuff.
And I mean, that's perfect. And it really is. Some people may have the perception from the outside like there's competition between groups of us, but I mean, we've never felt that. We have always thought the more of us who are invested in this work from a passionate, honest standpoint, and the more we can bring these kinds of questions or experiences to the public, the better. Because as I'm sure we're going to talk about, no one has all the answers here. And a lot of us aren't even sure what questions really to be asking. So I think the more we can get the public engaged in the topic, all the better, whether that be through a private team, a public team, or through something like the Haunted Walk, a larger commercial enterprise.
Yeah, and one thing that I can add to that is one of my favourite stories is having an EVP at the SDG jail, and I've had it analysed by experts in the field, and they even broke it down to voice waves to go, that's you, this is the EVP. It wasn't the same person, and again, one of your locations. So the fact that real teams can get the evidence, so to speak, once you guys hear about that, that adds to your repertoire kind of thing.
For sure. And there's even a difference between how Phantoms of Yore carries out their investigations and our Alone in the Dark experience. Phantoms tend to be extremely well versed on equipment and procedure, whereas our Alone in the Dark experience, we really tap into kind of more ancient or older techniques that people have used, throughout the history of humanity. We've got the phone ringing there. Maybe we'll just pause for a second.
It's
Are you able to hear that?
Just a little bit, but it's not too bad.
So we're fans of Jesus' equipment, you know, and it has a real specialty there. Obviously, we're more engaged with history and storytelling and kind of bringing new people out for the first time. Some people can find it a little intimidating, as you well know. You know,
Yeah,
oh, I'm going to sit in the dark for 3 hours in a supposedly haunted jail, you know. But we try to, ours is more of a guided experience to try to give people a little more confidence, a little more kind of faith in what they're doing. So that's what I love about it. Everyone's got a different approach. I know you folks, obviously, with the S at the start of your name, are pushing science kind of forward, which I think is a very valid approach as well. So I love how all these kind of different um, thoughts kind of all get weaved together. And I think there's something we can all learn from each other, which makes it really exciting and interesting.
exactly. Like you say, and at the end of the day, it's not my turf and your turf. It's one big family, one big family. So let's go into a few locations. I actually copied them all down. I went on to the sort of like, but I know that we can't talk about all of them because we would literally be here all night. So you mentioned the Chateau Laurier. What are a couple of stories that have come from there?
Well, I mean, my absolute favorite, and it's true that people continue to have experiences there. Even my in-laws were there, I don't know, around 10 years ago, and they had the experience of like footsteps running up and down the corridor kind of outside the room, and they keep going to look, and they don't see anyone there. And there was a kind of a door at the end of the hallway they were on. You know, they couldn't hear the door opening or closing. But my favorite story, which always gets a great reaction on the tour, is a newly married couple are staying at the hotel. And the first night, the woman's removing her makeup in, you know, a large mirror there. And in the reflection, she sees a closet door behind her, you know, just slowly swing open. But it's the next night or the next day, she's in the shower and everything's going normal when suddenly she distinctly feels a hand upon her shoulder, which always gets a great reaction. And there's a lot of other stories about the chateau as well, but it always ties back to, you know, a question that's irresistible often to us is like trying to quickly determine, well, who's the ghost, what's the ghost, and it's often never as simple as that. But in the figure of Charles Hayes, the president of the Grand Trunk Railroad, who built the hotel, having him die in such a tragic accident on the Titanic just so soon before the hotel was to open, really kind of gives it an extra cachet. Now, I will say one thing we've been fighting against for years is there's an urban legend, very well known in Ottawa, that kind of furniture or dinnerware destined for the Chateau Laurier went down on the Titanic. And while that's a cool story, as far as we can tell, after doing months of research on it, it's not true. But I think the important part here is we don't need the fictional story. The
Yeah,
just the you know the connection to, I mean, the development of the railroad in Canada to the Chateau Laurier being built to Charles Hayes on the Titanic. A lot of these stories you don't need to embellish with things that sound great but aren't true. So, I mean, we also do a daytime tour of the Chateau Laurier, more of a historical tour called Secrets of the Chateau, where we talk about, you know, the guests who have stayed there, the history, all these kinds of things. And if you've never been to the Chateau Laurier, or if you've never been to the other kind of railway hotels like the Royal York in Toronto, I mean, it just feels so different when you step through the revolving doors, and all of a sudden you're in this old world kind of lobby and space. One of those places where history is no longer in the background, but somehow steps forward in a unique way. So we love talking about the Chateau Laurier for sure.
yeah. And one thing that I'm I love my history. I really do love my history. Like all of these are from a TV show about the Napoleonic Wars, and yeah, and I've got behind here. There's more photographs, but I absolutely adore my history. And being from England as well, you have the like the upper class history, and you can drive past the Chateau Laurier and you can see the dude stood outside with his jacket on, his top hat on.
Yep.
And they still do that. And it looks so nice to see that they still respect the traditions and how people should be dressed. And I think that's one of the keys why the chateau is such a popular location.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It feels as if from another time, and also feels like a destination, both as a place to go and a place to consider. And for me, I'm interested in politics a little bit, so the political connections as well, where a lot of key meetings over the years have not taken place, in Center Block or on Parliament Hill, but have taken place inside the Chateau Laurier. And of course, one of the really awesome stories about the Chateau Laurier is you may have read about it in the news, was kind of the heist that took place during COVID.
The Winston Churchill.
The roaring lion portrait taken by Yusuf Karsh was, spirited away essentially in the night. It may have been during the day, but when the hotel was empty and kind of closed, which they eventually recovered and brought back, which is just another interesting layer to the hotel's history.
That's it. How did you get that out of the building?
Hey, it's a good question, eh? How did no one notice for quite a long time?
It's like, I'm sure there should be something on that wall, but I can't put my finger on it.
Something like Winston Churchill, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
hard to miss.
Yeah. I don't know him that well because I think he died the year I was born. But so let's touch on a couple more because obviously I don't want to spoil it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a company if we told every single story. But I've already mentioned the SDG jail, and we know that the Phantoms of Yore go there. We've actually had some encounters with a small child in the Phantoms of Yore, and we've had EVPs and such like. But are there any specific stories that you can mention that are on part of your tour?
From the SDG jail?
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not even that familiar with the SDG jail. We've never given ghost tours there. So mostly we've been working with Phantoms of Yore on the investigations. So just to be upfront about that, I know in talking to Elliot and Eric and a little bit of research on my own, I know there's some great stories there, but I don't know them well enough off the top of my head to mention them.
That's just not acceptable, Jim. I'm sorry. You should have done your research before you came.
A lot of ghost stories in my head.
Okay, in that case, then I'm going to let you pick the next one, then, so I don't catch you out again.
One of the more interesting tours we recently have started offering is called Ghosts of the Don Valley in Toronto, which takes place at a place called the Evergreen Brickworks today, but essentially it was the Don Valley Brickworks when it was in operation. And we started doing a tour there last fall. And there's a couple really interesting things about the site. First, it's, when we get ghost tour locations, often they fall in a certain kind of parameters. You're thinking heritage structures, often Victorian, those kind of connections. It's not uniform, but often pronounced. What's so neat about this space is it's very industrial. And the history of the site is more about the violence on the workers who worked there and just the the physical toll it would take in the brick making process. And you'd read about certain workers where one arm was longer than the other from day to day carrying the bricks around, and children used to be employed there, working with the kilns. So very, very difficult conditions. But what I think is so interesting about the site, and something we talk about quite a bit throughout the tour, is the idea, of course, about haunted objects. And usually when we think about haunted objects, we're thinking about something very particular. Maybe it's a painting, or I don't know, a creepy doll, or something of this nature, where that's how we think about a haunted object. But the question we kind of posed is, given the site saw a lot of worker death and injury, is it possible that all of the bricks from the Don Valley Brickworks are haunted objects? And we know that a lot of those bricks were used to build many of the homes in Toronto, including this one where a family got a very good deal on a house. And this is a lot of great ghost stories. The house was unexpectedly affordable for the family. And this house was made with bricks from the brickworks. And a short time after they moved in, everything seems to be fine. And then they wake up one night to a very particular sound, which is the sound of their furniture on their first floor being dragged across the floor. So they try to compose themselves, get up, see what's going on. And as they make it to the main floor, the husband suddenly is struck in the chest with a very kind of violent blow, sends him sprawling. It feels like invisible hands are like close around his throat. Very bizarre. They break free. They get out to a neighbor's house, and the house eventually gets sold without any explanation for this mystery and demolished. But the bricks are purchased by someone else to build a lodge out in the country. And this couple who bought the lodge wake up one night to hear the sounds of furniture being dragged across the floor, totally rearranging, their
That's
setup
crazy.
there. So I love that story, and it ends with that newer house, that lodge, burning down one night. So I love that story just because haunted objects are so fascinating, and trying to broaden what we think of haunted objects, I think, is a lot of fun. And for me, it's one of the ones where, as we're writing and working on it, like, it sends a shiver down my spine. So I know that, like, if I ever wake up in the night and hear, a coffee table or something sliding across the floor, I'm not going downstairs, Lee. I'm just like,
So what you're telling me, Jim, is that you're a bit of a coward?
well, yes, that's what you learn in this business.
That is so bizarre, because I've only really encountered one haunted object. I call it haunted, but it got my name in a ghost book in the UK. I was in the military, and I was working at the Royal Air Force College, where all the officers go through the basic training. And in their dining room, they have a lot of the famous Battle of Britain, the Dam Busters, and one of the paintings was of Douglas Bader, famous World War II pilot. And by the side of his face, there was like the outline of a woman's face in the painting.
Okay.
So they would take the painting down, they would clean it, the face would disappear, or the outline of the face would disappear. They would X-ray it. There was no other painting under the original. They'd put it back on the wall, and the outline of the face would reappear. And they've done that 2 or 3 times, well, probably more now. But whatever they do, as soon as they take the painting down, it disappears. As soon as they put it back up again, it reappears. And it's nothing to do with the light. It's actually something in the painting.
That's great.
Yeah, and I was probably about in my 20s at the time. I took some photographs, sent it to this guy. What's it? Bruce Barrymore Halpenny was his name, and he used to write about RAF ghost stories and stuff like that. And yeah, he actually put it in one of his books. So I was quite pleased about that. That was pretty cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, haunted objects are so interesting because, why are certain objects haunted but not others? What is it that makes them haunted? I mean, we could spend all the interview talking about that, but a funny story I'll share, which I don't know if I've ever shared before, is a few years ago, out of the blue, I got a package from Green Bay, Wisconsin. And inside was a note one of our podcast listeners listens to Haunted Talks, and they were like, "Hi Jim, I got these dolls, but I really think they're haunted, so I'm sending them to you." so, so I still have those dolls here in the house, despite my wife's absolute terror that we still have them. But it's, it really gets to be a question of like, does our belief impact kind of what these objects are capable of? And I love your photo example because that suggests maybe in that case, no, maybe it's outside of us or our own bias or thoughts. So I
Yeah,
love that example. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Haunted
I
objects are so much fun.
I actually did an interview a few weeks ago of somebody that has some haunted dolls, and if she's going to go away to a convention, she will actually tell them that she's going for a couple of days so they don't disrupt. And if she gets a new one, she literally sits it down and says to it, "Right, yeah, apparently you're haunted. You may have a spirit, but any shenanigans and you go into the outside shed." And she says, "So far, touch wood, everything's been, yeah, everything behaves."
Yeah, yeah. Knock on wood. So far, so good.
Exactly. But I love it how you can go on to eBay or something like that and you see like a doll and it will say not haunted. So
Well, and there's a whole, we did an episode on haunted dolls many years ago, but like there's obviously a whole fabricated industry about haunted dolls where people just write these backstories or whatever and claim the doll is haunted. But
yeah.
I'm a little skeptical of a lot of things. So
Yeah,
it's an interesting economic spin-off of paranormal.
exactly. So before we go on to maybe one or two more locations, before you actually got involved with the haunted walks and you didn't know what to do with your life, did you actually have any paranormal experiences yourself?
No, I would say no. Now that's not to say I haven't always felt something, and I still to this day struggle to define what that is. But I never had any clear cut moment where something happens. I always loved ghost stories. I loved going in haunted houses. I loved mysteries. But nothing really happened to me until I started working at the Haunted Walk. And one story I'll share, which maybe is a location you might have on your list, is the Bytown Museum, which is the oldest building standing in the city of Ottawa, which sits alongside the Rideau Canal between the Chateau Laurier and Parliament Hill, which kind of makes you wonder if there's a little bit of some type of convergence of energy or something happening right there. But one of the well known stories about the Bytown Museum is the sound of footsteps following you up the stairs with no one there. And we've told that, or we tell that story often on the tours, and I've told it for years. And one Halloween, we were in there setting up for our Halloween season tours. We were, changing the lighting a little bit, putting out some electric candles, that kind of thing. And we were very busy, just setting up and getting ready. So I wasn't really thinking about the ghost stories. And it is true to some degree that the longer you spend in haunted buildings, you might get used to them a little bit. They often still surprise you, as was the case with me, where three of us were in the gift shop. I was heading up to the second floor to take care of something, and as I started walking up the stairs, I distinctly heard someone walking up the stairs behind me, like no question. And it was so obvious that it didn't strike me as anything paranormal. I just thought, well, one of my colleagues followed me up into this stairwell, and I turn and look, and I can hear the footsteps continue like another stair or two, but there is no one there. No one there.
Wow.
So, since working for the Haunted Walk, and that one is kind of in a non-investigation sense. When you're investigating, of course, when you're finely tuned for changes in the environment or whatever aspects of the paranormal experiment you're running at that time, you're more likely to pick up on these things. And I've had many weird experiences, with um, at our Alone in the Dark experiences, even as we're training or setting up, which seems strange. But that one was just, I mean, it just caught me out of the blue. because I wasn't in a mindset. I was like, okay, I got to get things set up before the first group arrives,
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden, there's phantom footsteps involved. So
that's strange. And it's when I went to the Alone in the Dark at Cumberland Village,
Mhm.
Margot was there. I'd I'd been watching all the TV shows for a while, and I saw people do the Estes method, and I got an opportunity in one of the buildings. So Margot goes, "Oh, does anybody?" And I went, "Yeah, I'll do it," because I wanted to see it would be my first time doing it, and I wanted to see if it's real.
Yep.
And I'm sat on this chair, and people are all in like a semicircle. I've obviously got the white noise and the blindfold and everything on, and I did hear a few names that I said out loud, and then it came to an end. And I said to Margot, "Who was walking up and down?" And she went, "What are you talking about?" I went, "There was somebody walking in front of me, kind of like they were pacing." And she went, "There was nobody pacing. We was all stood still." And I went, because I was sat in the chair, I could literally feel the floor move like somebody was pacing back and forth. And I'm kind of like, yeah, did it really happen? Because you have to be a proper investigator. You have to have a certain amount of skepticism.
Sure.
It's like, did I really experience that? Yeah, because I felt the floor move, but there was nobody moving. Everyone was still in their original positions when I took the blindfold off.
And it's one of those things where you're not really expecting it. You're so concentrated. If you, for viewers or listeners who have done the Estes method, like you're so concentrated on, am I hearing anything? What am I hearing? And trying to be that neutral filter that allows things to flow through instead of your internal editor kind of monitoring. But that exact situation, I've seen that several times where someone has indicated they feel physical presence, whether that's something like footsteps or something close by. And if we have an EMF meter out, more than once, many times, I've seen it spike exactly as that conversation is taking place. So yeah, I love when experiments kind of have you focused one way and then something else kind of creeps in. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And we was at an investigation a couple of weeks ago, and Logan wanted to try to see what happens when someone does scrying. And for those people that don't know, you basically got a mirror in front of you. You sat in the room, you focus on the mirror, and allegedly spirits or entities can manipulate what you see in the mirror. And we had two cameras looking at the mirror, and yeah, yes, it did feel like things were changing in the mirror, but that could be down to the darkness and the shadows and your mind playing tricks on you. But I was speaking to a medium friend about a week ago, and she's just comes, and she's in Cleveland, and we hadn't posted anything about going to this investigation. And she goes, "Have you been scrying recently?"
Oh,
And I'm like, sorry, what? She went, "I've got a picture of you with sat in front of a mirror." And I'm like, yes.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then,
How do you
yeah,
explain that?
yeah, exactly. And it was really freaky.
But with the mirror scrying I find really interesting too. We do that at Alone in the Dark at Billings Estate in Ottawa and Black Creek Village in Toronto. And you often get a few different responses. Like on the one hand, people feel a bit silly looking at themselves in the mirror, but often people do perceive some kind of change, which again may have a scientific explanation. But I think the interesting question is too, does looking in the mirror change your environment or does it change you?
Good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. And like I say, yeah, yes, we do have science in our name. Yeah. We don't admit to being scientists, but we will try to prove something and debunk it as much as possible. So we have like black mold detectors, we have like carbon monoxide detectors, and we have all that rational stuff. And then if we go to a private investigation, we'll use that prior to getting the bells and whistles and the gadgets and seeing if we can actually communicate with something. So we do kind of treat it from a rational, sensible point of view. If you've got noises in your attic, you may have a rodent problem. So so we look for like rodent drop-ins, and so we're completely logical. So it is kind of a scientific approach, but it's not. I'm a scientist. I'm looking for this. I'm looking for A, B, and C.
And those are the best cases, right? I mean, we've all seen investigators who maybe are too quick to jump on something without much rational thought. But for me, the greatest mysteries in the world and the greatest ghost stories are the ones that are kind of carefully considered. And what are the elements here? What can we disprove? What can we count out immediately? So once you put it through a little rigor, if the story still stands up or the event still stands up, I mean, that's what it's all about for me.
Exactly. And I was interviewing a girl that could do some astral projection in the fall. And if you haven't watched that podcast, that one's actually quite amazing because she blows my mind. But she says to me, "You see spirits?" And I went, "No, I don't." She went, "Don't bullshit me. Don't." And I went, I don't. She went, "You do. You just haven't acknowledged the fact." She went, "How often do you see things out the corner of your eye?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, every now and then." She went, "Exactly." It's like,
there you go.
Yeah. So I know that you've got a little subject that you want to jump onto a soapbox, so to speak, and to talk about. So you wanted, and I've got it written down, a 13-minute argument. So
yes,
I'm going to time you for 13 minutes and see how we go. So I know you've got something, so now's your time for this.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, but I've never tried to put into words as one kind of coherent thought. And this comes from someone with a love for the paranormal who has spent now 20 years kind of deeply invested in it. And it's around the primary question, of course, of what is a ghost? Most people, when you hear that, expect kind of one or two answers, that it's either a spirit or some part thereof of someone who lived and has died and has either an impression has been left, or perhaps we can directly communicate with that person or their spirit or their soul in some other kind of place. That, or of course, it's nothing at all. It's a trick of mind. It's your brain misfiring. It's telling stories to ourselves. Those two positions have really dominated the conversation in popular culture for decades. And I think both of those are absolutely wrong. Not because the truth is somewhere in the middle, but because the truth is somewhere else entirely. And I think we've been asking the question, what is a ghost, inside of a room that's too small, if you will. Our Victorian parlor really can't hold this question. You're probably familiar, or listeners are, with the stone tape theory. The idea that buildings and places can absorb emotional events and kind of replay them under certain conditions, like a recording caught in the wall, an imprint, a moment of intensity that kind of outlasts the moments itself. At Fort Henry, where we give tours, people often see the gallows that were erected to conduct executions. The execution of Niels von Schultz, for example. People still, have that experience of seeing something that took place so long ago. Now, what strikes me is this maps almost perfectly onto ordinary human experience. We are all haunted by people who are no longer with us. Sometimes because they died, sometimes because they left, sometimes because we did. We are haunted by places we cannot return to, old versions of ourselves, by decisions that still echo with us and impact us, even when the moment is long past. Grief, regret, longing, these are hauntings too. Something that is over but not quite yet done. Something that continues to exert presence. Now, I think once you see that connection, the paranormal stops being a niche interest in dark rooms and old buildings, it becomes a way of thinking about echoes, traces, and the strange persistence of things that by all rights or understanding should be gone. It becomes connected to the human condition itself. Now, I'm not saying this means every ghost story is a metaphor. I do not believe that. The best reports, as we were just talking about, deserve to be taken seriously, not blindly, but seriously. What I'm calling for is less a question of belief and more a matter of imagination. Because one thing we have learned, especially through our Alone in the Dark experiences, is that the people involved in an investigation seem to matter a great deal. Their intent matters, their openness matters, their willingness to engage matters. The groups who are most curious, receptive, and genuinely hoping for something to happen often do experience more. Now, that doesn't automatically explain the phenomena, but it complicates it, I think, in a very important way. It suggests the human mind may not be observing the paranormal, it may be participating in it. And there's precedent for this idea in science, of course. In quantum mechanics, the observer is not a neutral bystander. I'm sure some folks know about the double slit experiment, a famous physics test that proves tiny particles like electrons or light can act both as solid objects and fluid waves at the same time. The truly mind-bending part of these particles is that these particles seem to decide how to behave based on whether someone is watching them, changing their physical reality simply by being observed. No physical, no tangible connection. And then there's quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where two particles, once connected, continue to influence each other instantaneously at vast differences in time, greatly far apart. They can still, connect with each other. Now, I'm not saying either of these scientific kind of theories or experiments proves necessarily anything about ghosts, but I am saying in a universe where observation shapes outcome and where connection persists across impossible distances is a very different universe than one most skeptics are standing in when they quickly dismiss paranormal experiences. And once you admit that possibility, the door, I think, opens very quickly. Could a person or a group of people create the conditions for an experience to emerge? Is there some strange interplay between expectation, consciousness, environment, and whatever else may be present that produces what we call a haunting? Is the phenomenon, at least in part, something we are doing individually or together rather than something happening to us? I don't think we can dismiss those questions anymore. In April 2024, we ran a series of experiments on our Haunted Talks podcast during the total solar eclipse. You may remember Ontario was in the path of totality, and we wanted to use that window, that collective moment of shared attention, to try an experiment. One of the one we tried a few, but the one I'll mention today was inspired by the Global Consciousness Project, a Princeton-based initiative that monitors random number generators for anomalies during major global events. Their hypothesis is that the moments of mass human focus can create subtle, measurable deviations from true randomness, as if collective consciousness leaves a fingerprint on chance. We did a simpler version. We asked listeners to use Google's random number generator to produce a digit between 1 and 10 at the height of totality, when the moon was blocking out the sun. We had 137 people take part in the experiment. In a world of pure or flat randomness, you would expect each number to appear roughly 13.7 times with that many people. Instead, the number 7 came up 22 times. That's a surge of 60% above the expected average, while the number 4 only came up 6 times. Now, a skeptic might point out, with only 10 possible numbers, The odds of some numbers spiking are not astronomically low, and that's fair, and that's true. But the statistics cannot account for the nature of the generator itself. These weren't people picking their favorite number in their heads. They were triggering a cold silicon algorithm designed specifically by engineers to be unbiased. A computer has no lucky numbers, and it doesn't know the moon is currently blocking the sun. Yet the math fluctuated. If, as in the double slit experiment, the active measurement changes the reality of what is being measured, then perhaps simultaneous measurement of 137 people looking for a sign caused that computer code to briefly flicker. The odds of the spike were reasonable, but the choice of the number I think is interesting. If we go down a numerology route, the number 7 is mostly closely associated with introspection, spirituality, and the seeking of truth. And at a moment where all these people are looking up at the sun, engaging in this kind of experiment, could be coincidence, but it is interesting, maybe a digital observer effect. But this is exactly the kind of result that makes the question of human participation in these paranormal phenomena deserving far more attention than maybe we're giving it right now. It suggests that for one brief window of time, our collective awe or interest and the math of the universe kind of vibrated weird or maybe even at the same frequency. Which brings me to the tools we typically use in investigations. And I want to pause here because I know the audience must think about this. Anyone listening or watching us right now has probably used some of these devices. And the standard toolkit we can all think of, right? You got your EMF meters, you got spirit boxes, you got digital audio recorders, temperature, motion sensors, and all of that has its place. These instruments have really helped build the field. We use them extensively in our own investigations, and we respect the investigators who use them in a careful and thoughtful way. But we may be building instruments for answers we have not earned yet. If we do not know what a ghost is, how can we possibly design the right tool to detect one? If the phenomenon is not consistently electromagnetic, reliably environmental, not even external of our minds or bodies in the way we assume it to be, then no amount of equipment is going to close the case on this. We may be measuring the wrong thing with great precision. The core problem, I think, is we're trying to solve the problem backwards. We need better questions, not better gadgets. Let me give an example of what a better question might look like, and one we humbly tried when we ran investigations at the CN Tower in Toronto. Not a location that anyone would traditionally call haunted. No tragic history in and of itself, some in the area, of course. No spooky Victorian corridors. It's one of the most recognizable modern structures in Canada. It is one of the tallest transmission towers in the world, which is exactly what interested us. What happens when you do a paranormal investigation or paranormal experiments in a place designed to reach into the sky and broadcast signals, as well as receive them? Does elevation matter? Does the closeness to outer space matter? During one session there, we did a double Estes method. So we had two people isolated from each other with the headphones on, listening to the spirit box. One of them said unprompted, and we didn't have this direct discussion with any of the guests, but unprompted, one of the subjects says, "I am not a ghost." Our host replied, "You're not a ghost?" "No." "Are you some kind of spirit passing by?" "Yes." "Where do you normally reside?" "Consciousness." Whatever you believe the spirit box is actually capturing, that exchange did not reach for the familiar vocabulary of here, a building, the tower, a name, a year. It said consciousness. at the top of a transmission tower during an experiment designed around the idea that mind and environment may interact in ways we don't understand, whether through the location, not through the location or the place, but in awareness itself. So, what am I really arguing? Well, I guess, what if the paranormal stopped being a genre and became an open question? What if we stopped assuming it only belongs in the darkness, in old places, with the same inherited framework? What if the next frontier is not another abandoned asylum at night, but the ordinary world approached differently? Daylight experiments, group intention, unconventional spaces, genuine curiosity of what consciousness is actually capable of. Because the only place any of us have personally experienced the paranormal is in our own minds. Maybe the answer isn't better technology for a mystery we don't yet understand. Maybe the answer is curiosity broad enough to let the mystery change shape. We have spent so long looking for ghosts in the wreckage of the past, in crumbling stone, quiet graveyards. But if we are participants in this reality, then the haunting isn't just behind us. It is happening right now as we speak. It is being broadcast through the internet, through the towers we build, the intentions we hold, and the very way we choose to observe the world. Reality is more porous, more participatory, and more haunted, I think, than we have ever dared to admit. Not just in the dark, but here in plain sight.
How the hell do you expect me to come back with something after that? I love that. That was absolutely mind blowing. And I think we can actually connect it not just to the spiritual world, but when people are talking about UFOs and aliens, you could join that together and consider both of them.
Absolutely.
And a couple of points that I could kind of connect to is what I tell people all the time. The amount of people that when they go on these investigations, they hear the word demon. So they automatically think that there's something malevolent in the room. But I always flip that and say, well, how do you know the spirit or the entity is not calling you a demon? Because the technology that you're using, they're not familiar with. So as far as they're concerned, it's all witchcraft.
Well, that's a great point. And it's something similar we hear all the time when we're doing Estes methods, is particularly at a new site. Like once we've been doing a location like Cumberland, we've been doing for a little while. So it's almost like the spirits get used to it. But you'll notice if you're at a brand new location you've never been to, or a session's never been done there, just as you describe, there is often this kind of like, oh, this is a weird thing, or like, look at why are the lights doing this, or how does this work, or this is an awkward way to communicate. So your point about demons, it's right on, and UFOs as well. I mean, if you wanted to even go further, you would say, well, how do I do have a little bit of interest in UFOs. When we hear abduction stories, they have so many similarities to ghost stories, right? You have these often translucent figures unexpectedly showing up in the middle of the night. And really, maybe this is all about kind of, whenever we can, dropping our preconceptions about all of these things and kind of trying to relook at everything with fresh eyes, like you did with that demon comment. I think it's exactly the kinds of things we as leaders in the paranormal field need to be encouraging others to take up that torch.
Yeah, and my second point that I wanted to raise, and it also connects with the demon word, the amount of times that people go to locations and they say, I've been scratched. It must be an evil entity. It must be a bad entity. It must be malevolent. I can't even say that word. But I have a theory on that as well. So if you and I are in a room and one of us has passed, if I want to try to get your attention, I will make a noise. I will call to you, and because one of us is in the, let's just say that, the spirit realm, and one of us is still alive, the alive person potentially is not going to hear the spirit. So if that's two human beings that are both alive, the next rational explanation is that they will shout louder to try to get the attention. If that doesn't work, the next step is to reach out and touch you. So my theory, and obviously I can't prove it, is when people say they've been scratched or they've got a bruise, it's not necessarily an evil entity. It could be that spiritual energy transference from whatever's there to the human, and that is caused friction or whatever on the skin, created a scratch, created a bruise. And when I try to explain that to people, they kind of look at it from a different way and go, "Oh, I've never thought of that before." And it's kind of connected to what we've said about the demon and what you've just said.
No, I like that. I like that framing. And we could even just go one step earlier, because kind of the first question is this truly something paranormal that has happened to this person? Or again, is there a more obvious explanation? They scratched their arm and didn't realize it. Or, I know one of the places where that often happens is in the, I think it's the tunnels under Edinburgh. We had a storyteller during our virtual campfire series during COVID, and they would often get these scratches, or a cemetery in Edinburgh, maybe. They would always, get these scratches, which raises the first question, well, is it paranormal or is this something more regular? But if we say, well, it's not mundane, it has some type of supernatural explanation, your question is a perfectly apt one, which is, well, okay, even if it's spiritual, even if it's supernatural, there's still a bit of a question of intent, or what does the scratch mean? As you say, if we take spirits to be a thing outside of ourselves that are operating in the environment, well, we know our bodies react to all sorts of different things in all sorts of different ways. Think about allergies, in particular, how they invisibly kind of affect us. So yeah, I like that thought of, it's often easy and dramatic to kind of go to the most macabre kind of explanation. But as you're pointing out, sometimes it's not the most interesting way of looking at it.
That's it. And like you say, and that's kind of putting that rational head on that rational body. And one thing that I absolutely hate is when you see it on TV shows or investigations, and people go and touch that device on the floor. It's like, look, if this place is haunted by spirits from the 1800s, they are not going to know what that word device means.
A good point.
Yeah, so I always say, touch the box with the light on, or whatever. But I try my hardest to never use technical words. Yeah, look, the REM pod. Okay, go and touch the REM pod, and then, you can imagine a spirit going, what's a REM pod? I don't know what you're talking about. And it's the same kind of thing. Don't use complicated words that people, if they do exist from 100 or so years ago, are not going to know what that word means. Keep it simple, stupid, as they say.
Yeah. And I do like the idea too of, when you're doing investigation, obviously it's a highlight. If you get some type of concrete response or something that, and perhaps most people don't know, but most investigations, nothing happens. That's just the truth. And if you think otherwise, I wonder why. But like, that's just the truth. When you get something that's really kind of noteworthy. But what can change in every investigation is you, right? How your additional insights, Suddenly being able to put yourselves in the shoes of someone who may have lived in this house in 1915 before going off to war, whatever it may be. Like, again, that's the kind of haunting I was kind of talking about earlier, where you're not getting, the REM pod's not activating, the EMF's not going off, but suddenly inside you, you understand what it may have felt like to be someone heading off to war or living through the Great Depression or these kinds of things. So it would be a shame, I think, if the insight from an investigation is only the technology. I think there's a lot more at play and a lot more that we could explore than that.
Yeah, because we do have the technology and we do have some bells and whistles gadgets, but something as simple as a cat ball. Some people go, but it's a toy for a cat. Yeah, you're right, it is. However, it reacts to vibration. And if you put it on a floor and somebody stamps on the floor, the chances are that cat ball is going off. That does not mean it's supernatural. But what we do, we have a vibration device, and then we put the cat ball on top of that.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've not just got one device that is activating, you've potentially got two. So if one goes off and the other one doesn't, then could that be something more than just if both of them go off together? Because if both of them go, the chances are it could be somebody's like come up behind you, one of your colleagues and stamped on the floor, which has set both off. But for one to go off and not the other, that's something more to look into.
Absolutely. And as I really want to be clear, like when we say gadgets, I don't really mean that in a pejorative sense because we use them. They're the best tools we have right now in our kind of toolkit. Yeah. It's really a question of like, how do we expand that toolkit more? Like, for interesting, it'd be interesting to do that experiment with the two ghost balls at the cat balls at a distance. So while you're investigating, leave one in the car or something you can record or someone else can monitor. Then that becomes interesting. How do you bring an investigation out of a closed, set off environment? How can we measure if what you're doing in one place is actually creating anything else in any other place? Because it could well be. And for us as investigators, it's hard. It's very hard. And I do think investigations have to be fun, or otherwise, you get bored and you wouldn't do it. So we got to keep the fun. There's got to be a little suspense. There's got to be some drama as well. So I would never want to lose those things. I just think we should get weirder. Like how can we get weirder while we're doing experiments and do them purely as experiments? Because we know a lot of the most interesting scientific discoveries or human knowledge come from unexpected experimentation. Like, the first person who ate a mushroom or something, like when that wasn't in the knowledge of the time, that was a very bold step. So I'm trying to think, and I'm always trying to think, or we are always trying to think, what are some other bold steps we can take, which may turn things on their head and reveal something unexpected.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you used the mushroom analogy and not like milking a cow, because that would have completely changed the nature of the subject. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. But before you go, I'd like you to tell people of where they can reach out to the Haunted Walks if they'd like to go on a haunted walk. Give us your website and all the normal stuff, and then people can reach out and come and see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, Lee, thanks so much for having me on tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I love chatting with other paranormal enthusiasts, and I love what your team is doing. So keep up the great work. We have to do some type of joint event, I think, at some point with all of us in the near future. But I would like to invite everyone who's watching or listening to come and join us for a ghost tour. If you want something a little more passive, you just want that great entertainment, hear a few great ghost stories, or one of our paranormal adventures. If you want to get a little more involved and try your hand at investigating. We have them running throughout March break, which is coming up. I'm not sure when the episode drops, but also every weekend, and then more regularly as we hit the summer, as we always then crescendo into the fall with the Halloween fun or the Halloween shenanigans. Best spot for information and tickets is to visit our website, hauntedwalk.com. There you can also find our podcast, which I host, Haunted Talks, and you can also find that on all the major podcasting platforms as well. We'd love to have you listen.
And just for the record, this episode will be going out. See, when it goes out, it won't be a week on Friday. But I'm telling you right now, it's going out a week on Friday. so that will be the 20th.
The very end of March break. There's still time, people. Get your tickets.
And it's still all the summer. But again, Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. You have blown my mind. I wasn't expecting it to, but you have. Which thank you very much. And I hope we stay in touch, and I will speak to you very soon, my friend. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thanks so much, Lee. And of course, sweet dreams.
Or spooky ones.